All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Plugged In with Chris Howard. I got my man, Martin McNair here, author, advocate. I swear, man, every time Martin and I talk, we probably spend about 30 minutes talking before we even hit record. Just catching up, man, and talking about, just life. And I really enjoy our conversation. So I'm really happy to have you back on the podcast to talk about your new book, The Fifth Quarter, A Parent's Guide to Preparing Student Athletes for Life Beyond the Game. And as you and I were talking earlier, the biggest theme that and we'll jump into your previous book because I kind of want to lay the ground for that also. But the biggest theme that is for me that I took away from the book was preparation, right? Are we prepared? Are our parents prepared? Are they prepared with having the knowledge and the resources in order to transfer that over to our kids so that our kids know what to experience when they go off to college? And when I look back at my own process, recruiting process, and I told you this earlier, I said, man, I feel like my parents dropped me off at the damn wolves. Like we didn't know anything, right? And everything is laid out in the book. I mean, incredibly, but it just made me realize just like how unprepared we are and what we think this whole process is about.
Oh, hey Chris, thank you for having me, man. Preparation is the key, but that was really the main goal. Like, I'm like you. I was a first generation college kid, so there really weren't any instructions on what was expected or really what to do at that next level. It was almost like, hey, I'm dropping you off and you figure it out yourself. My mom would probably kill me if she heard me say that, but pretty much that was it. There was no conversation that around anything that I include in the fifth quarter. But one of the things for me was, when Jordan was in the hospital those 2 weeks fighting for his life, man, I would come in the hospital and I would walk down this long hallway to the ICU and to the ICU elevator. And man, that hallway probably, I swear, man, it seemed like it was the equivalent of 2 football fields, right? And I kept asking myself, what did I miss? Did I not ask the right questions? Of course, I didn't ask the right questions because I didn't know what right questions to ask. I assumed. And for me, it was really like, what did I miss? What did I miss? What questions didn't I ask? And I would go through these range of emotions, feeling impotent, angry, helpless, because, here was my son in a situation and it was nothing I could do to help him. So, of course, like I assumed full responsibility for that. But I didn't really beat myself up too long, but for the most part, what I realized was what I missed was what I didn't know. I couldn't teach. I thought I taught Jordan everything that I could teach him for him to be successful at that level. And the lesson just kept going on, going on. But one of the things I think for me was, I'd always taught Jordan to be coachable, meaning, hey, if coach say run through that brick wall, run through that brick wall, or if coach say jump off that cliff, jump off that cliff. So for me, it was more so one of those situations that I'd always told him to be a leader amongst his peers, how to advocate for himself and amplify his voice amongst his peers, but I never taught him to do it around adults. And I think that if I had planted that seed at a very early age, who knows, it could have turned out better, differently in a sense. Yep.
Right. Yeah, let's kind of go back to the first book. The first book, Can My Child Play? The questions we should have asked. And right. Kind of, for the people that don't know, kind of just lay out your story and Jordan's story.
Yeah. So Can My Child Play? Basically, it had a dual meaning to it because one of the main things that as parents, that's the only two questions we usually ask. So here I was, the coaches from University of Maryland was sitting at our kitchen table 2 days prior to signing day, right? I remember it like it was yesterday. We was eating spaghetti dinner and, everything is good, right? And it was the head coach and the offensive line coach at that time. And I only asked two questions, Chris. First of all, can you get some playing time, right? And the second question was around mental health and substance abuse support because I owned a treatment facility at the time. Not really knowing the magnitude, but that just seemed like the right questions to ask. And the answers to the question were, if Jordan comes to the camp in condition, if he comes conditioned, he can apply for a job, right? I don't even think he answered anything around the mental health and substance abuse support. But the thing was, our story, and the big thing for me was, what's the worst that could happen at a Division I school University of Maryland. It could have been University of Alabama, Penn State, whatever, Ohio State. But we don't, as parents, we don't have, or I didn't have an in the event of mindset. All the questions that I encourage parents or I demand parents to ask nowadays, I never thought to ask that. If he gets hurt, what safety systems do you have in place in the event of type questions? What emergency act? Who's going to be the one if my son gets hurt? Who's going to be the medical professional in the field to attend to him? So I ain't know none of this stuff. So our story was one of the most talked about sports stories for about 3 years, right? And I was in the process of really just wanting people to know our story because, really I wanted people to know the intimate story, and I wanted to tell the story from our view where, from the outside looking in, it was one thing or it appeared one way, but I really wanted to tell the story from the inside out and really just kind of give people, an opportunity to really see like who we were as people, because I think that for me and the rest of my family, we thought Jordan would have played on Sundays, or had the potential to play on Sundays. I never thought he'd be the poster boy for student athlete safety from a national perspective. So for us, that was really the main thing. Like, how do I tell our story where people can get to know us intimately in a sense and know the why? And people used to see Jordan's mom and I just kind of took it, oh, that was your wife, or that's I see you and your wife. And, the thing was, it wasn't that, we were married. We just co-parented extremely well. We like siblings. I'm only child. My family, me and Tanya have been joined at the hip almost 40 years for the most part, right? But I just really wanted to tell our story and tell the why behind our story. Like this is the reason why we were so close. And, this is prior to our experiences, prior to Jordan being born. And then at the end of the day, when it didn't work out between us, the main thing was his success. And we agreed early on that no matter what it took, we was going to work together to ensure that he became a much better human being.
And so, let's transition into the new book, the fifth quarter. Was that kind of like a natural progression to go from, the questions we should have asked to now we're talking about how do we not only prepare these parents, prepare the athletes, but was that just a natural transition as far as like, okay, what comes next? What comes after that?
Yeah. So great question. So it was a natural progression. But Chris, the thing for us was we always had early on, our progress and impact has been extremely incremental, right? So you're learning something. My goal as a founder of a foundation is I always tell my team, let's just do more this year than we did last year. And if we do that, we constantly make a progression, right? So we always had 2 seasons. We had peak season and valley season. So our peak season would always be from April, May, all the way through September, when these type of tragedies always kind of happen, right? The danger zone or the peak season. And then right after September, we would kind of go into valley season. We would just kind of fall off. So I'd always just been trying to figure like, how do we stay relevant all year long? Where, okay, cool, we do our thing in the summer, and now, we need to go into schools and colleges and all that type of stuff. But the interesting thing is, it's hard to talk about heat when it's hard to talk about heat stroke when it's 23 degrees outside.
Right.
On February 22nd, when heat ain't an issue, that's the furthest thought from people's mind. So what I wanted to do really was focus, and all this is based off our story. How did I prepare Jordan? What did I miss? And how do we prepare other student athletes? So or students in general for that next level of their life, especially with collegiate sports and life outside of sports and all that type of stuff. And the main thing for me was I wrote a high school curriculum, and it was like, okay, here we are, talking to kids, and we're piloting in a couple schools, and we talk about everything: mental health, substance abuse, good decision making, peer pressure, financial literacy, all these different things, right? And leadership, where do you fit in? All these different confidence, resilience. But one of the main things we're teaching is to kids. So I said, you know what? It all starts at home. So it's like, let me write a parent's guide where parents are on the same page, right? Based off of our story and some of the funny stories I tell that parents never think about with other friends of mine that experience with their kids. these were the things that I wanted to kind of focus on in the fifth quarter. So yes, it was a natural progression where I just wanted everybody to be on the same page. Because of course, I may talk to something too about the kids, same things, but kids ain't gonna come back home and tell mom and dad, hey, we discussed this in class today. Let me give mom and dad a different lens on what this looks like. The title came from, I tell parents all the time, if you think about anything, when you get a college, if your child or student athlete gets a sports scholarship or something like that, if you think about anything other than life after sports, you think about the wrong thing. And that's where the title of the fifth quarter came from.
Yeah. I want to kind of dive into the book a little bit. I got my book right here.
Yeah, man.
Got all my highlights. I'm not Oprah,
Yeah.
so I got to make sure I remember everything.
No, there you go. Thank you.
But you talk about in the book where the reality is being a student athlete at the collegiate level is tough. It's not just about sports, it's about balancing academics, social life, and for many, newfound financial opportunities through NIL. These are conversations, again, that we don't typically have, right? Because we, as parents, we think that it's all about, I got to get my kid a scholarship. I got to get him on campus, right? And as you and I talked before, when you really look at the recruiting process and you look at how much time you actually spend talking to these coaches, getting to know these coaches, it might equal 5 hours of conversation, actual meaningful conversation.
Sure.
And when you think about, now I'm giving my kid to this institution, to this coach, to this other human being, it really puts in perspective the amount of trust and naivety that we have as parents, thinking that these institutions kind of have their best interests at heart. Because at the end of the day, this is a business, and coaches are trying to keep their job. So they're going to tell you whatever they need to tell you to get your kid.
Absolutely.
How is it that, what's the advice that you would give parents to try to help them find that balance of ciphering through the bullshit and at the same time making sure that they can be an advocate for themselves?
Got it. So I think that, obviously a book like The Fifth Quarter prepares parents, but Chris, the whole landscape has changed significantly when Jordan was being recruited, 15, 16, 17. Now you'd be to the average parent, you almost need a lawyer and an accountant to go into in the recruitment process. It is what it is. Just to look at contracts and look at, really what you're signing and the opportunity that you have here for your child, especially when any type of financial arrangements or agreements are, in play nowadays or used as incentives for you to come to school. I think that to answer your question, a family needs to, first of all, make a collective decision as a family. First of all, an 18 or 19-year-old cannot make a life decision of this magnitude, right? Parents have to make a decision based off of what is best for our family. Don't send your kid to Alabama and they come back to Maryland and Maryland don't have a significant Alabama alumni. Now, if you in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, all that's cool because that's the tri-state. But again, how many alumni up here in Maryland? So you got to think about life after sports, right? Man, everybody thinks that their kid is going to go to a level, if you're realistic, a level of professional sports, right? And what's going to happen is the numbers are going to get smaller, smaller, and smaller, right? So what that means is out of 8 million student athletes that are currently playing high school sports, only 6% of them going to go to a Division I college, right? Only 1.6 of football players are going to make it to the NFL. 1.6%. Yeah. That's a team of 105 kids. You do the math, right? Maybe 2 to 3% going to make it to the NBA, right? Now, the main thing is, I think that as parents, we have to be very mindful and ask the right questions while these coaches are in our living room. Guess what? This is your most prized possession. Do not be afraid to ask anything. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And if a coach can't answer that question, a recruiter can't answer that question to the best of your ability, think about something else. Don't think about, oh, I'm going to mess up my child's opportunity. Do not put your child, it's like almost, we ask people all the time, do not send your child to the swimming pool without a lifeguard. And recruiters going to tell you the same thing they told me. Oh, head coach, I'm going to treat him like he one of ours. That's how you treat one of yours?
Right.
And I don't want anybody to be in that position if something goes wrong. I don't wish it to happen, but these folks, like you say, they strictly for themselves and strictly how can they keep their job. And guess what? Your child, look, I tell people all the time, something happened to your child, a tragedy, the game ain't going to never stop.
That's
They're
right.
going to keep on rolling. So as parents, we have to make the best decisions, and we have to ask the right questions. And again, there's no such thing as a dumb question. And again, if you don't feel comfortable as a parent with the answers that you're getting, think about another location or another school.
Yeah, I hate to bring this up because I have to mention my rival Ohio State in this. But in the book, you say that you had a great conversation with Urban Meyer, and he said, "Mr. McNair, whether you choose Ohio State or not, make sure you get a lifetime scholarship. These schools will get everything they can out of your athlete. You make sure you do the same." You said that advice hit home. How did that change your perspective in that recruiting process at that time? To hear that come from Urban Meyer, a big time program like Ohio State, how did that help you like start to now look at the recruiting process as a parent?
Yeah, because it's almost like I was looking at something today, and they were talking about all of the discounts. And when you become my age at 55, right? All the discounts you can get, from different retailers, from restaurants and stuff like that. But the point was, if you don't ask about these things, they ain't gonna tell you about them.
Right.
Nobody's gonna offer to say, "Hey, Chris, do you need the senior discount?" You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, if are you over 55? Ain't nobody asking you that. So nobody never said anything about a lifetime scholarship until we were, and I think that's how we wound up landing at Maryland, because when we went the educational process, they had Jordan and two other guys, they highly recruited guys we were pitching to. And when they mentioned that, now, Chris, keep in mind, the education person mentioned it, right? And it's almost confirmed. Did we see it in writing? No, because we just signed the paperwork. Ain't nobody looking at no fine print.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So at that time, that was really that was the main thing. The landscape changed significantly. And just to break down what that lifetime scholarship meant, because I asked, Coach Meyer, like, what exactly is it? He said, this is the school's guarantee that if your son leaves early or your daughter leaves early, to go to the next level, they can always come back and get the degree. Mm-hmm. Now, that was 2016, 2017. That was significant. Now it's all about a different platform. How much are you paying my kid, or what are you doing to incentivize my kid? So again, we still have to look at the protections around that. Like I said, you need a lawyer and an accountant just to go ahead and get your kid into a good school, because all of the things that, are being offered now.
Yeah, it is definitely, the landscape has definitely changed in the sense that the power now resides with the athlete, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because now they can go and make demands, and it really is kind of like the show me the money situation now in college sports. Sure. with NIL. And I think that has complicated things so much more so than what people are realizing, because now you're adding the element of, before we used to be able to hide the kids under the amateurism blanket, right? Like, these aren't professional kids. Don't be so hard on them. They're not getting paid to do this. Well, now they are getting paid, right? Now they are making millions of dollars, which means more scrutiny is going to come with that, right? Fans are going to be even more intolerable than they were before, because now they're looking at these kids as if they are professional athletes. And I think there's going to be a blowback on that, because just imagine the kids who had to live up to just having a 5-star ranking. Now you got to live up to the fact that you're making millions of dollars. What kind of toll is that going to have on the mental health of these athletes, right? Not just boys sports. We're talking about sports across the board.
Yeah.
Everybody. How do you prepare your kid for that aspect of it?
Sure. Conversation at home starts at home. One of the main things, especially and specifically in that space, we have to educate ourselves as parents, and we have to show we have to be knowledgeable ourselves. Like I always say, the better educated that we all are, the safer all our kids will be, or the better prepared that we all are, the safer all our kids will be. These are conversations that you literally have to have at home. And at the end of the day, Chris, you have to realize that the mind of an 18 or a 19-year-old, regardless of their athletic ability, regardless of how big their collective agreement is, or if they look up and get an NIL deal, they still a kid mentally. Whether they 6'7", 6'10", 7 feet, 6'5", you name it, this is still the mind of an 18 or a 19-year-old. So it's essential that parents are involved in the whole process of their preparation for these types of events or preparation for that next level.
Yeah, there's a funny story in the book where you talk about don't send your child to college unprepared, right? Which is something that we talked about. And there's a section in the book where I guess a friend of yours, their son kind of fell in love. And before they knew it, the kid had flunked out of college, right? And was, I guess, going up to school and sleeping on somebody's couch or whatever. And the
Yeah.
school didn't notify the parents that their kid was out of school.
Yeah.
Which seems crazy to me that a coach would not have called to inform the family, the school would not have called to inform the family. How do we, and we were talking about this earlier, a friend of mine we were talking about like once you got to college, it is almost impossible once you leave the football building, you are pretty much out on your own, right? It is you go do whatever you want to go do.
Yeah, right.
Coaches are at homes with their wives dealing with their own issues or whatever. How do you try to maintain that level of connectiveness to your kid once you send them away to college?
Yeah. So in that particular section, I know I talked about, first of all, we have to protect them legally. Legally.
Yeah.
Flat out legally. So and let me speak from our experience. So when Jordan was still living, a couple of days prior to him passing, obviously we didn't see the magnitude of what was going on, but we know we needed some type of legal representation. So, obviously a lawyer agreed to take on our legal team agreed to take on our case early on. And the very first question that our lawyer asked was, do you have a power of attorney? The very first question. And we like, a POA or a power of attorney for what? Jordan, only 19. Yeah, but at 18, he's emancipated, right? He's emancipated. And we like, well, he's still calling home asking for permission to go out on the weekends. Yeah, but he's emancipated, right? Legally, nobody ain't got to tell you squat. Now, luckily, in our case, Jordan wasn't on the West Coast, Midwest, down south, where it might have took us days to get to him as opposed to him being 45 minutes up the road, right? Mm-hmm. Luckily. So the point is, you have to protect your child financially, right? And medically, and whatever other protections you can get to still make these types of life decisions for your child legally. And that's the main thing that, really in that case. But you got to have these. And Chris, you read the book. So every chapter, I always have key takeaways, and I have exercises or conversations you need to start having with your child. Example conversations where like start this conversation dialogue now, right? And that way, this, because like I mentioned earlier before you press record, a lot of this stuff, this is our first time dealing with it. Even from a parent's perspective, we don't even think about these things. Yeah. One of those stories I talk about, my friend who, that particular situation, right? And her son was coming home like everything was cool. And then went back to school, and then somebody saw him off of campus, right? And called her and was like, why he ain't in class? She found out he done flunked out. He never, again, the mind of an 18 or 19-year-old in love, he ain't gonna say nothing. But again, did she send him out unprepared? One thing about it, Chris, I emphasize, your child. You know your child. Right. If don't put them in a sink or swim situation and they're gonna sink, that's not fair to them. So prepare them the best way you can in regards to that.
Yeah, we talked about this off camera before we hit record. The resources that we have today just did not exist back
Yeah,
then.
of course.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah,
even
yeah,
when Jordan was playing, and definitely not
yeah.
when I
Right.
was playing. When I was playing, and again, I think we put a lot of trust in these situations, in these institutions, in these coaches that they're going to treat our kid like they treat their own kid, and that's just simply just not the case. But how has writing this book and sharing your story helped you personally?
Man, Can My Child Play was very, very therapeutic for me, right? Meaning, I tried grief counseling early on, just really couldn't get like the right clinical professional really for me at that point. So when I wrote Can My Child Play, I literally had to relive the whole story, right?
Mm,
To get the accuracy of the story. And it's like, oh, we went here, oh, this happened, that happened. And in the process of writing about it, and I'm a writer, so and I always tell people a lot of times that unfortunately experience any type of grief or tragedy or just death in general, write. Because writing is therapeutic. Just start writing. If I don't say nothing else, I say just write your feelings down. And for me, the first book basically just kind of like gave me a sense of closure on the whole thing, right? On what it was, the whole process overall. And you and I talked about another book project that I worked on, and then with this one, to me it helps because I haven't. One thing I realized as an author and a writer, you got to be compelled to share stories, man. Ain't no whole bunch of money in it. You know
yeah.
what I mean? It just is what it is. It gives you the credibility of knowing as a subject matter expert, but at the end of the day, man, the feeling of the rewarding feeling of impact comes from just being able to make a difference. Or like I told you, what do we want? What do we want somebody to get from the book? How do we want somebody to feel after they read the book? So regardless of what the book is about, but the goal for me is really to get a parent that's empowered to say, now I'm better prepared. Now my child is better prepared to go to that next journey of their lives. So for me, man, like that's why I keep writing because it's therapeutic for me.
That's awesome, man. We talk about the percentages of kids who make it into college, and kids who make it to the next level, which is the NFL. And I remember I think the thing that really opened my eyes was, and he's a good friend of mine, but he was the starting linebacker at the University of Michigan, and he was the poster child. He was on every cover of every magazine. He was the shit. He was the guy.
Right. Okay.
And he was somebody I looked up to, still look up to this day. He's a unbelievable human being. But I remember him going through the draft process. And in my eyes, from what I understood and how talent was evaluated as a sophomore in college, I'm thinking like, well, he's on all these magazines, he's two-time captain, he's
Yeah. Right.
Big
Right.
Ten
Right.
Player of the Year and all these other
So,
things.
so,
And he literally went undrafted. And it was at that moment I was like, man, I better get my ass to class because if he
yeah.
didn't get
Right.
drafted,
Yeah.
ain't
Right.
no way in
Yeah.
hell
Right. Right. Right.
I'm
Right.
getting drafted.
Sure.
How do
Sure.
we how do we prepare kids and parents for that reality? Because everybody thinks their kid is going to the next.
Everybody. Everybody. One thing we need to teach kids is fluidity, right? Fluidity. And a lot of times, but we need to have fluidity conversations, meaning if this don't work out, what else we going to do? You know what I mean? If this don't go the way we want it, because guess what? We all know that life don't never go the way it's supposed to go, or we think it should go. But
Right.
we learn that skill set fluidity to the point where we know how to move, right? Where a young person, the average young person and the average parent that think their child is going to go, right? They don't see what's beyond. So in our podcast, Chris, I have college athletes that are dealing with every topic that we talk about. I interview a student athlete that is currently on a team in the college currently so they can speak to that. So meaning here's a kid that you're going to get injured, but how you going to stay committed to the game? I mean, we hope you don't get it, but that's a reality of sports,
Right.
regardless of what you're playing. You may get a injury that may sideline you for the season. How do you still stay connected? How do you stay confident? How do you stay resilient? They need to hear this from other people versus you think you're gonna go to a college and you're gonna start and you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that. Yeah, mom and dad, it ain't gonna work like that. It's
Right.
just not. So the thing is, we need to teach those fluidity skills of life early on. And it's just like, okay, some of this stuff you're not gonna deal with it until you experience it. I mean, until you experience it. But a lot of times start having those conversations now. So when they do experience certain things, this won't be your first time seeing it, or you won't, freak out or crash out like, oh my God, what's going on? We talked about these are the realities. This is the reality of some of these things not going in your favor. Prime example, Chris. Yeah, you may be a star athlete in your high school or, in your high school, in your local town, right? And you this and you that and all these different things. So therefore you get recruited, right? And, you got these big fish, small pond dreams, right? But when you already know, you get to that next level, man, everybody on the team earned the right to be there.
Yeah.
Now you're a big fish you're a big fish in an ocean of talent,
Right.
right? In
Yeah.
an ocean of talent. Now, unless you're just that special, now you got to find out, where do I fit in, right? Where do I fit in? And again, these are all the things that we really kind of focus on, in our curriculum, our podcast. And those are conversations. And even with parents, I told you something my father told me forever. And it didn't even resonate until I was in a certain situation as a grown man that almost 50 years later, or
Right.
40 years later, where it was just like, wow, you've been saying this my whole life. Now it resonates. So with parents, we can, even if it doesn't resonate now, but we don't want them to be in these certain situations where these things arise and they clueless. Like, oh my God, what I'm going to do? Where in
Right.
reality, if you started having those conversations, it ain't got to make sense now. Because what my father told me didn't really, it didn't resonate. But when I was in that situation, I'm like, wow, man, he's been telling me this my entire life. So the lesson will resonate. So we just got to have those conversations early on before they get to that level. Like, everything ain't going to go the way you think it's going to go or the way you think it should go. But
Yeah.
again, we got to be able to adjust, have that level of fluidity or that skill set of fluidity to kind of roll with the punches in a sense and keep moving to a level of success.
Yeah, I think that's huge, man, because like I remember talking about, big fish in an ocean. I
Yeah,
remember being, when I got recruited to, Michigan, being one of the top recruits in the country. And,
for sure.
you get there on campus and then it's like you see how the difference in size, right? How big these cats are. They look like grown
Right,
ass men.
right,
They look like
right.
kids.
Yeah,
And I remember the reality going in practice and going up against a senior where I'm used to hitting guys and running them over and stiff arming somebody into the ground. And I remember going up against another freshman linebacker from Saginaw, Michigan, a guy named Sam Sword. And I remember him and I going at it. I'm thinking I'm about to run through this dude. And when we hit each other, he didn't move. And at that moment, I was like, this is different, right?
yeah. This
Like
is different.
this is just another level of athleticism that
Sure.
I was not really prepared for, right? Because
Yeah,
you're used to outrunning everybody. You're used to
yeah,
being the number one or the top talent there,
yeah, man.
but
Yeah,
everybody is there. And not
yeah.
everybody had the same opportunities as you, but it
Right.
doesn't mean that they're not good. And the other thing one of the things that I also struggled with once the game was over was identity. And I want to get your thought on this because, and I'm sure with Jordan playing, how old was Jordan when he started playing?
7. He was probably around 5 or 6. Then we played basketball forever. So he started
Mm-hmm.
playing football again around 13 or 14.
13, 14. Okay. So I was playing sports since I was probably 7, playing
Yeah,
football,
yeah. Played
So my
everything.
identity, right, whether it was football,
Sure.
baseball, basketball, track, my identity was wrapped up into being an athlete, being
Hmm.
a professional football player, a college football player, and having a certain regimen. My life just basically regimented out, right?
Sure.
I knew what
Sure.
time I was going to go eat. I knew what
Yep.
time it was to go lift. I knew what
Right.
time it was going to go watch film. So every aspect of my life was basically regimented out. And I knew
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to do and where I was going to be. Once I stopped playing, I really struggled with trying to figure out who I was outside of being an athlete. And I think that's one of the areas, and when you talk about fluidity, where we have to also make sure that our kids are not tied to that identity, that they're more than just being an athlete. How do you prepare not just parents, but how do you prepare kids to understand that that is a reality for them?
Sure. I think that, this, and I'll answer this in two parts. First of all, you got to keep your kid grounded, right? And we had that conversation with Jordan, probably he was like 16 or 17. Man, we had I think he had 300 pieces of mail in the mailbox as a junior in high school. And I remember we sat him down one day and was like, look here, Mr. Big Man, we don't care about none of them letters, no, none of that type of stuff. If you can't get a passing grade in algebra, you won't even qualify for the NCAA. So we don't care about none of that. Now go take the trash out, right, Mister Guy,
Right.
And I think that when as parents, when we're realistic and keeping them grounded, like all right, like and the thing is, man, keep in mind, sports, as you just said, sports was your only job. That was a job. So as parents, we got to understand a lot of life experiences they're not going to get because even in my case, Jordan didn't have to work. He had a car. As long as you did good grades and you did sports, we was cool with that. So keep in mind, you wasn't like dad when you was working at the local fast food restaurant when you was 15 and a half. By the time I was Jordan's age, I'd already had 3 or 4 jobs. I've
Right.
been working since I was that. So a lot of times with athletes, they miss out on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Really like the life experiences. So some of that stuff they ain't gonna get till they get to start life in a sense or get out there. So I think the answer to your question, and this is another thing when you talk about identity, that's something that we deal with even as adults, right? Because when I talked about that other book project, and I'm gonna be honest with you, Chris, a good friend of mine told me one day, and I was kind of complaining about something that I felt I was entitled to in regards to the foundation, right? And he said, "Man, I'm gonna tell you something, and it's gonna sting a bit." And he said, "Marty, man, your whole identity has become Jordan's story."
Mm.
Knocked me on my feet. Like, what? He said, "I know it's gonna sting," and I thought about it, and it stung because since Jordan had passed, Chris, there was nowhere I've ever been where somebody said, "Hey, this is Marty McNair. Man, you remember his son Jordan passed in University because it was a national story."
Right.
That was, oh yeah, yeah, I remember that. But what about Marty, the successful businessman? Or what about Marty, the author? What about Marty, the motivational speaker? Like I had all these things in my toolkit prior to Jordan passing.
Right.
So again, I kind of had to shake out of that myself to be like, okay, yeah, I run a foundation, and but again, that's not who I am in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think that it's something we just all deal with, or we can let certain situations take our identity in a sense. But I think that as parents, when it comes to student athletes or their child at home, you got to keep them grounded. Like, man, you ain't there yet. You know
Right.
what I mean? So we ain't gonna let you get caught up in that. And I think if we keep them grounded, I think that that could decrease the chances of them saying, because Chris, it's hard when you talk to older guys and guys talking about, man, I played in NFL, and it's like, well, how long did you play? Oh, I only played 3 years. You know what I mean? So, but again, guys hold on to that,
Yeah.
like that accomplishment, and now you 60, 70 years old.
Right.
Wait up, what have you done since then? Oh man, I played in the NFL, and I got a buddy of mine, he played with OJ at Buffalo. He
Mm-hmm.
played with Buffalo, he played with another New York team, played with Denver. This brother, great guy, went to Morgan, and Chris, he got drafted in 71, 72. Guess how much his signing bonus was? $2,500. He said he bought a 10-speed bike with his bonus money to keep his legs together. But again, I know this brother has done so much more than that,
Right.
that's his only claim to fame, man. And you don't want your child to be that guy to
Right.
me. Yeah.
Right. So if there's one section in the book that you could direct parents to, and if there's one section that you could direct a player to in the book, what would those two sections be for either?
I think I would direct student athletes to mental health, right? The mental health themselves. And I think that I would direct parents to protecting their children legally because that's so crucial. Like those two are the main, everything else are kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But young people have to protect their mental health because the average collegiate student athlete is going to fall into four categories: anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to teach. I mean, I was in DC today at a school, at a high school, and I was talking to a recruit that he signed with, he's going to a HBCU. And man, I was telling him, I say, so what you want to do? And of course, I asked him, what's the big picture? And I'm like, of course, he's like, bro, I'm gonna go in the league. Of course you do. Yeah, until you see the work that's involved.
Right.
But I was having a conversation with a man, and I'm like, man, your main thing, you need to take care of your mental health first and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't no mind readers in college. Ain't no mind readers to the point if you're going through something and you don't tell somebody you're going through something, how would they know? And secondly, on top of everything else, do not do anything that would embarrass your parents.
Yeah.
Think about them first. And I think some of those are core messages along with, the rest of the other information in the book. But parents, legal protection, student athletes, mental health protection. Because again, you and I just talked about mental health stuff. And I think that it's just so important for young people to identify what their mental health triggers are and know if they get overwhelmed, how to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think those are two of probably the most overlooked scenarios for parents and for student athletes because one, I didn't even know about the POA myself. And
Uh-huh.
two, from the mental health aspect of it, it was just something that was never really discussed. Just simply because as an athlete, we're taught to be strong and swallow our fears and everything else and not really shed light on those things. And then also at the same time, it's not very receptive for the coaches, right? Because last thing you want is to be judged by the coaches that you're somehow some sort of labeled as some sort of head case, right? Which is, I think a lot of people would be surprised. That is a term that is thrown around a lot by coaches when they're talking about a kid who may be struggling mentally. It's not that he doesn't need help, it's he's labeled as he's a head case, which I think is unfortunate. So, what's been the most rewarding part of putting this book out there? I mean, has anyone's reaction really touched you?
Well, the thing is, Chris, we just dropped, technically, we ain't even did an official drop. So officially we drop next Monday, which is Jordan's birthday, which is March the 3rd. So we're still waiting on, the consensus to come in. That's why I strategically, really like I sent copies out to people like yourself and people,
Mm.
just to really kind of promote. But, really when you send people that have a level of biasness, meaning, your friends and family, everybody's like, wow, everybody's takeaway, like, great information. And, but I always like to read reviews of the people that I don't know, or the
Mm.
people that's in the process,
Right.
because again, it's like I already know like it's a ton of books that may assist with the recruiting process, but I just think the difference between the fifth quarter is it's 2025 version. You know what I mean? Like this is I'm dealing with the now landscape, you know what I mean,
Right.
versus, something that was relevant 5 years ago when we were in the process. The landscape looked totally different then. Where now, like these are real time questions that all parents should be, going over how to prepare your kid at this point. Because, like I even told you in the book, man, I wish it was something like this out when Jordan was in the recruiting process. I would have bought it and reread it because, man, you're stepping into that uncharted water, man. And like you said, here we have, and I, matter, let me go a little bit more straightforward to the point. Let's just think about it, right? As a parent, you go on visits. You go on visits. They can't really give you anything. And of course, everybody is going to be nice to you. And you're seeing all these unrealistic things. You're seeing all these professional helmets in the football building, and you ain't really asking you're asking some educational questions, or you're just asking the generic educational questions, right? They can't really give you anything. They got your kid on the field, and then you all agreed to come to this school, right? So therefore, your child is committed to coming to the school. Now, when you come out, now they can wine and dine you. They're going to take you to an expensive restaurant. You're around some other parents, but again, you're still only getting fluff. No offense to any coaches. I understand the process, but
Right.
this is the reality. So between those couple visits, the signing, I mean, the kitchen table or the living room visit, right? When you come out and you sign and you come out for the official visit, you might hang out with the coach if you're there for the weekend or whatever the case may be. So you're right, a total of 5 hours of somebody telling you everything you want to hear.
Right.
But if you ain't asking no hard questions, then you bring a guy like me in, right? Especially at Maryland. And Locks is my guy. But I wholeheartedly support what's going on there. I support him. So I'm speaking from the heart. But again, here's me, a voice of credibility. But again, they may bring somebody like that in. And of course, I'm Maryland all the way. However, but you said 5 hours. That's it.
Right.
Maybe 7 max. And you're saying, here, take my most prized possession. And I'm all right with that. So what happens is, I think from a recruitment perspective, coaches don't ask enough questions, and parents ain't telling no lies, if you know what I mean by that. As a recruiter, I need to know everything.
Right.
I have a mental health background, so certain terminology, we just didn't use, we don't believe in saying somebody's crazy where somebody that don't know, this is a head case. When in reality, of course, I never, so I always try to be politically correct with those types of phrases. However, as a parent, you need to be fully transparent in regards to the things your child deal with, because if you don't, they're going to come out at the next level. Once he or she is in somebody else's hand, they're going to come out anyway.
Right.
Now, what's happening there? Because now head coach asking the recruiter, how'd you miss that? Or if you don't sit here and say, my son deals with this, he deals with this, he deals with this, or my daughter deals with these things, how can you successfully prepare them for that level? Because now if I know, right, from a preventive perspective, now if I know these things, now I can support when these things arise. So now we in front of it. Oh, okay, this kid has this kid has that. At the grassroots level, I always tell parents, how can you send your child on the field and they got asthma and you ain't telling the coach or the team mom and you ain't got the pump? Or if your kid got sickle cell, how you going to send your kid out here in the blind and the people that are dealing with them don't know these things? Right. At least partner with these organizations, these schools or these systems to prepare your child for a level of safety and success all the way around the board. If my child got depression, we need to find out where the mental health professionals on campus are. It might be something we need to be mindful of. If my child is, and nobody going to say, oh, he came in here drunk last night, or he came in here, I know he experimenting with marijuana or whatever the case may be now, but when he get to the next level, when it happens, it's like, oh, not my child. But in reality, if you're transparent, now you're getting your child some help from a preventive perspective. So when these things come up, it's like, okay, we already knew that. So we were already in front. So it's a two-way street in regards to the success of your child. There has to be partnership, and there has to be a full level of transparency. Because again, most parents are going to same way I did. And I don't think that Jordan didn't have any issues that, we didn't, tell, or that we omitted or left out, but again, I just think that overall, when parents get to this, when student athletes get to this level, we have to prepare them and prepare the people around them to deal with what they deal with.
I love that you said that, because it really is a collaboration, because it's like, you dropping, again, to your point, it's like you dropping your kid off at daycare and he has allergies or tantrums, or whatever, and you're not informing the people that's supposed to be taking care of them. And what I mean? And so a lot of those things go missed, or they don't know how to prepare for it. And that's the first time, Martin, that I think I've ever heard someone talk about how it is a collaborative effort between parent and organization. And I think that's great. And I think every parent needs to understand that, because I think there is a level of fear, right? If I tell the coaches
too much,
right, too much, then I
yeah,
risk
the opportunity.
the opportunity, the scholarship being pulled because they may not want to deal with that, right? So there's a level of fear with that. But like you said, I'm handing you my most prized possession. And so where that fear may be justified, what's more important, right?
Absolutely. Right. Your child's well-being, your child's health mentally and physically, emotionally, spiritually. Those are the things that are important, and you don't want to put them in a position where those things aren't addressed.
Well, listen, I
So,
don't want to give away everything that's in the book because I
yep,
want people to buy the book and
exactly.
read the book.
Yep.
And the fifth quarter, a parent's guide to preparing student athletes for life beyond the game. When I tell you that it is absolutely a guide to preparing, as Marty and I were talking off key, talking off the podcast before I hit record. The biggest thing, again, going back to what I said earlier, was going through my own recruiting process and realizing like we didn't know shit. Like we didn't know anything, right? We just took everything at face value. We took everybody at their word. And like we didn't have those resources. And so now, if you're a student athlete, you're a parent, you have these resources and you're able now to go in informed. And not only that, you're able to inform your kid on what to expect, how to behave, how to advocate for themselves. And I think the fifth quarter is an excellent book for parents and the student athlete to basically take this information and just be prepared. You cannot have enough preparation. Preparation equals success, in my opinion. So, Marty, man, I appreciate you, brother, coming on the podcast, man. As always, it's always great to catch up with you. We always talk about 40 minutes before we hit record.
Yep, yep.
And it's always great, man. So go get your copy, folks. The fifth quarter. I got mine. And Marty, where can people find the book? And
Yeah,
also, what's the latest going on with the foundation also?
man, please go to the Jordan McNair Foundation.org to get an autographed copy. It's available on online platforms, of course, Amazon, Ingram Spark, and Barnes and Noble online platforms. But you just won't get the personal experience of us signing. Man, we're pretty excited. Jordan's 26th birthday is March the 3rd. So we usually do a fundraising campaign. This year, Chris, I'm just asking everybody to purchase a copy of the book and tell 10 of your friends. So I'm just asking, everybody that buys it, just tell 10 people, man. And, really, we all know somebody that's a parent or a caretaker of a student athlete. Chris, what we're doing nowadays, man, we're ramping up. Of course, Maryland and Georgia are two states, all of Maryland and that Atlanta surrounding area. So what we're working on now is one-day high school summits, right? And we're doing parent education and student athlete. So we're doing panel discussions and everything that you and I just talked about, those important things, mental health, financial literacy, how to legally protect your kids. So we do kind of like our Kobe curriculum with the student athletes, breakout groups, the whole nine. And then on the second part of the day, we do parent education where we talk about, really how to protect your kid, especially to get them to the next level. Fifth quarter, can my child play? So those are the things that we're working on right now, man. Georgia has been really good for us. Now we just focusing on, I encourage anybody that wants to partner with us, any sponsors that want to really get behind this movement of educating parents, coaches, and student athletes, not only on the field, but off the field, and definitely life after the game. Yep. And always follow us on social media because we put everything there for sure.
Absolutely. Marty McNair, man, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And the next time you're in Georgia, you got to look me up.
Yeah, Chris. Matter of fact, I'll be back down next week. I'll give you a buzz.
Well, yeah, you better call me now.
I definitely will for sure. I'm putting it on my to-do list, man, for sure.
Awesome. I
Hey,
appreciate
brother.
it.
As always.
As always, brother, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
My man. Thank you.